Ojalá. Si se prendía el audio.
Ricardo, no entiendo por qué es un insulto. Claro, sí que aprende la gente, pero no sé si mi novia se compró un gorrito que le hace para que lo saque. La verdad, yo digo
Como en la primaria que estuvo la bolita de garbanzos.
cada vez
Ay, mira, se habla, güey.
Por eso tengo Y cuando yo veo que empieza a jugar, digo, no, pero pues,
How are you? Did you manage to see the bar with the practice exercises? Hola, sí, bueno.
Como puedes ver, no será así, ahora se nos amiga.
Okay, let's review cost of capital, shall we? Now, which are the two sources of financing a company has? Correct, debt and equity. And what did we say beta represents? Market risk, I heard. That's correct. The sensitivity of what to what? The sensitivity of the returns of an asset with the returns of the market. Okay? Now, from the balance sheet of a company, we remember we have assets. Where are the assets located?
In the left side of the balance sheet.
On the left-hand side, on the left-hand side, on, right? Now, we discussed this earlier, but let's review it. If we manage to calculate the return on the assets of a company, what does that return represent? What does the return on the assets of the company represent? I'm not talking about ROA. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the return on assets. I'm not talking about the financial ratio. What does this represent? What is it?
It's the net income divided by the price of all my assets to see like in what percentage or how many dollars each asset makes me or something like that. Yeah.
But that's exactly ROA, isn't it? Yes?
The increase in value of the asset,
Say it again, please.
increase of value in the asset,
The increase of value in the assets,
uh,
expected increase,
in a percentage.
okay, on a percentage basis, on a percentage basis. Okay. All right. And how can we relate the return on the assets of a company to the financing side of the balance sheet? What is the relationship?
The investment they are doing with the amount of the equity.
The investment they, you mean the shareholders or who are they?
Shareholders, or no, the investment by the,
Who is they?
the people who decide what is going to, what is the company going to do with the money.
So you mean the board of directors? To say it again?
Yes, can represent the investment that the board of directors are doing by the equity of the company.
I agree. Assets are the investments of the company, but what is the relationship between the return on the assets of the company and the financing side of the balance sheet? That was my question.
You use the money to buy assets.
Okay. With the resources the company raises from the balance, from the liabilities and equities, that money is used to invest in the assets. Okay?
The
Right.
returning assets have to be equal to the sum of the return on liabilities.
Say it again, say it again.
The return on assets to be equal to the sum of the return on liabilities. And the equity.
We could change liabilities for debt, right? Because not all liabilities produce return.
But it should be equal or greater, or it has to be equal.
When shall it be equal? When shall it be greater?
I mean, I think it should be equal when the back is the same as the return of liabilities and
Say it, but I did not understand the other
when
conditions.
an investment project has the same WACC, the return on assets should be the same as the cost on debt and equity.
Say it again, sorry, say it again.
Um,
If the return
on a project
on a project
is the same as the WACC, that is the
So you mean the IRR? Right?
yes.
Okay, so if the internal return, rate of return of a project is equal to the WACC of what?
Of the company,
To the WACC of the company, then what?
then the equality in the part of that board should be equal.
I still don't get it. So the return on assets is what? The WACC or the IRR?
No, I'm lost.
We need this comparison just for approval purposes, right? That's the usage of this comparison. So we need the return on assets to be at least the weighted average. We are missing something here. The weighted average of the returns on debts and equity. The weighted average. Why if? Because it cannot be the same if the company is financed 90% with debt and 10% equity, as if it were financed 20% debt and 80% equity. We cannot have the same equality. Right? It has to be a weighted average. So the return on the assets of the company should be at least equal to the weighted average of the financing costs. Which are the financing costs? The cost of debt and the cost of equity. Why? Because those are the two sources of financing for firms. Right? There are many types of debt. There are quite a few types of equity that we already reviewed, but it is either debt or equity, nothing else. Okay? Then I may decide I need the return to be greater for approval purposes. That's my decision. That is my risk profile. That is an agreement probably we reached at the board of directors meeting. Okay? This is enough. Why is this enough? Why should this be enough for a company?
Because you can pay the amount of the equity.
Because we already agreed on the terms, the cost of debt, the interest rates we will pay. We agree on this. Otherwise, we shouldn't have taken the loans. Otherwise, we shouldn't have issued the bonds. So we agree on this. So that was approved. We decided that this was good for the company, right? And for the return on equity, we estimate this. Based on what? Probably on the market risk of the company. So that's why that should be enough. If it is not enough, it's because I did not do my calculations correctly. So it should be an equality. Why? Because the equality represents the expectations for both types of investors of the company. If the expectations are wrong, then it's not the fault of the equation, it's my fault. You see what I mean? Why do I want this to be greater than this? Because I don't trust my calculations. That's the reason. See? It should be enough. Why isn't it enough? Because I am human, because we are humans, because we make mistakes, because the market changes, because we are not sure about this. Uncertainty makes us choose an opportunity cost for the company greater than it should be. Uncertainty. Human conditions. You see? Are you following me? So the equality stays. If I change the comparison, it's because of my fears, of my own mistakes. All right. So the cost of the return on the assets of the company should equal the weighted average of the expected returns on the two sources of financing of the firm. And we call this the cost of capital of the firm. The opportunity cost of capital. Right? So there is a risk associated with the assets of the firm, called or measured through the asset beta. What does asset beta measure? something called business risk. I have already shared a CFA paper in our Teams group in the folder called Cost of Capital. After the midterm exam, you will start reading this, and you will find out the definition the paper provides for business risk in comparison with market risk or financials. They call it financial risk. Business risk has to do with the uncertainty around the operation of the firm. How certain or uncertain are we about the level of sales, of revenues we will get this year, next month, the following week, in 10 years' time? Okay. Anything that has an impact on the revenues of the firm, that is business risk. Okay. But there is, inside the business risk, part of the business risk is the financial risk. That has to do with the financial decisions of the company. Am I using 10% debt? Am I using 50% debt? Am I using 80% debt? Am I using bank loans? Am I using bonds? Am I using floating rate bonds? Am I using euro bonds? What type of financing am I using? Have I issued preferred shares? Only common shares? Have I issued in domestic currency? Have I issued in foreign currency or currencies? That changes the financial risk of a firm. Yes?
Could you repeat what is the relation between asset beta and cost of capital of the company?
The cost of capital of the company is the return we expect on the assets of the firm. That return, in turn, depends on the risk of the assets, which is measured by asset beta, which in turn measures business risk. Okay, how risky this business is. Okay, so let's see. Do you know? Let me think of a good example. I want to compare two companies. Think of PepsiCo. Do you know? This is not a company, but you can relate it more easily. You know, mineral water, it's a local beverage company, right? Whereas PepsiCo, thinking about the beverage part of the business, it's a global company. Okay? Let's think of PepsiCo or Manguitos, right? As a family-owned company. Okay. PepsiCo, we know it's a public company. Don't we? Don't we know? What can you say about the difference in the financing the two companies use? Yes.
One purpose uses preferred stock to control, to have still control in the company. I'm talking about the company. I guess they prefer to keep voting rights to themselves rather than to the shareholders. And
Do you know they issue preferred shares?
I don't know, but if it's family owned and it wants to stay that way, I suppose that the thing you have to do is to issue stocks that have more voting value than the others.
Okay,
I think preferred shares wasn't the word I was.
I think so.
Yeah, preferred, yeah, no.
It does, I mean, it doesn't have to be preferred, right? So that you control the company, you don't have to issue preferred shares necessarily, right? Okay, equity, preferably equity, okay. And what would the difference with PepsiCo be?
PepsiCo probably, as it is in family owned, probably doesn't have too much interest or doesn't care as much as the other one to who gets to control the company. And maybe they are more open to mergers and acquisitions than Chico. And I don't know if they prefer debt or equity. I don't know what are the things that make.
Okay, you want to say something?
Yes, I would think at first sight that maybe Topo Chico has more debt than equity, the ratio, like they use more debt than equity.
More debt.
Yes, because as a family-owned business, they won't be like that open to risk losing power of the company. And I would expect that PepsiCo be more like at the same rate, or maybe more equity than that, because they are not like that hard trying to control themselves as Topo Chico and it's a family-owned business.
Sure.
Yes,
But isn't it like the other way around?
usually it is.
For example, for Topo Chico, that is a family-owned company, we can expect that it is like a smaller company than PepsiCo, right?
Yes,
So
it
Topo
is.
Chico is more tempted to issue more shares than PepsiCo, right? Because PepsiCo, I don't know, if it has like millions of issued shares, and Topo Chico maybe just has like 1 million or 2 million, right? So for example, if Topo Chico wants financing, they are more tempted to issue more shares than to have debt, but PepsiCo is more tempted to have more debt and issue more shares.
Yes, in practice, what we see is that family companies don't like that. They are afraid of asking for money. They are afraid of borrowing money because it represents a commitment. So usually family-owned companies are almost 100% financed by equity. Public companies,
But remain earnings. But also, the family-owned companies usually financed by remain earnings.
yes, or new capital.
Also, debts for small businesses are, the debt is more costly
Usually, yes,
because they are more risky.
they are riskier. So we would usually see large multinational public companies using a greater proportion of debt than small family-owned companies. As we know, having a financing the company purely with equity could be more expensive than financing the company with a combination of debt and equity, because debt is usually cheaper than equity, right? But that's not something family companies worry about. They worry about control, as someone of you mentioned. They don't know about the CPOs. You remember it?
Yes.
I can raise money in the form of equity. It's not a debt. I share only earnings if we have earnings, right? And they don't have to be infinite. I can place a maturity for the CPOs if I wanted. So there are ways of financing my company, my family company, without losing the control, without the worry of having a commitment to pay interest monthly. Okay. Of course, I need experts that can help me do this too, right? Legally, accounting speaking, financially speaking, yeah, it costs, yes. Consultancy costs, yes, it does, right? But do we need the money? Yes. So we have to make a cost benefit analysis. Okay, so going back to, that means that financial risk for companies that use more debt than equity or proportionally more debt than other smaller companies are riskier from the financial point of view. Would you agree? Yeah. Talking about financial risk, we could consider large public companies that use a greater proportion of debt in their capital structure being riskier than companies whose capital structure is mainly focused or concentrated in equity. Not necessarily from the financial point of view. Imagine you are a credit rating agency and you're trying to give an opinion about the financial risk of these two companies. Which of the two companies is exposed more to unfavorable changes in the market or cash flows to repay debt?
In their market, financial market, or in operations, for example, they stop operating and they stop having income.
Both. The market, internal conditions.
I guess.
Which company is riskier?
Mexico, because they have to be paid. And the other one, well, they can just
Defer it.
defer it.
We just don't declare dividends this year. We don't have the money to pay because revenues decreased, because we had a lawsuit in the company because something happened. Cash flows decrease, earnings decrease. I don't have money. I need the money to pay other things. I don't pay dividends. But I cannot say that to the creditors. I have to pay. It's a commitment. So from the financial point of view, from the financial risk point of view, a leveraged company is riskier than an unleveraged company. Simply because of the commitment to pay. We don't have the commitment. It's not compulsory. Okay? Okay. So levered firms are riskier than unlevered firms. The cost of capital is the weighted average of the cost of financing. It means that the risk of the company should also be a weighted average of the risk of the debt and the risk of the equity. Right? We said that beta measures what type of risk? Market risk, right? So the risk that the change in interest rates, among other market conditions, affect unfavorably the results of the company. So what if I have fixed rate debt only? And so in my capital structure, I only use fixed rate debt. Fixed rate bank loans, fixed rate bonds, fixed rate bond notes, fixed rate. What can we say about the market risk of this type of debt?
Was we use a floating rate?
So let's say I have 10-year bonds. I issue 10-year bonds at a rate of 9.5% per year. What is the market risk of my debt? What if CETES reached 12%? What if CETES dropped to 8%? What happens to my risk? It does not change. So from that point of view, the risk of my debt is 0. If I manage to finance my company, the debt financing of my company at conditions which are independent from the market, then I don't bear debt risk.
Was it easy to do that, like only fixed rate debt,
Yes, you can do it,
but more expensive?
usually. So, but we have still cost benefit analysis. Do I want security? Do I want certainty? Or do I want cheap money? What do I want? What is best for my company? That's something I have to decide. Okay? So we call this debt beta. Debt beta is a measure of the market risk of the debt financing of the firm. If the firm manages to have the debt financing at fixed rate or 90% of the debt financing denominated in fixed rates, we can say that there is no market risk for the debt of the company. Therefore, debt beta equals 0. Something what we can never say about the market risk of the equity. We can say that for debt, it is plausible, it is possible, yeah, we can do it. But even if we wanted, we can never do that with the equity beta. Is that clear? Equity beta can never be 0. Not possible, okay?
In public or in private companies?
For any type of company. Yes.
If we issue a portable bond, do we have the debt beta,
Yeah, we do.
even if it's like a fixed rate?
Yeah, because then I might not, I do not control the decision of the maturity of that. Yes. All right. So asset beta is composed by debt beta and equity beta. The asset beta of a firm measures business risk. Many times we assume the debt beta of a firm to be 0. Okay, even if it's not completely true. But we have to be aware that if we use 0 market risk for a company whose debt is denominated 100% in floating rate, we are making a mistake. Okay, we are simplifying the analysis, but we are getting away from reality. That's something we need to understand. But we can make decisions to simplify calculations, to simplify reality, to simplify our decisions. But we have to be aware of the consequences of those simplifications. As long as we understand what we are doing and why we are doing what we are doing, it should be all right. Do I make myself clear? Yes? Okay. Equity beta measures, because debt beta is many times 0, then equity beta is the parameter that measures financial risk. Okay? And because asset beta is a weighted average of the debt beta and equity beta for a company at a certain point in time, equity beta will always be higher than asset beta. I repeat, because asset beta is a weighted average of the market risk of the debt, market risk of the equity, and many times the beta is 0, that makes equity beta larger than asset beta. If you make the math, it has to be that way, right? Okay? Do we agree? That would be for the same company under the same conditions, right? Okay, so I try to explain When you read the textbook or you read the CFA papers, you will realize sometimes they use different terminology for the same concepts. So sometimes you will see the proportion of debt as debt over total fair value, and sometimes it will be WD. So these two symbols represent the same concept, right? So we mentioned this earlier. The cost of capital of the firm ignores taxes. And that's why the cost of capital of the firm, so the return on the assets of the firm is constant over, not over time, but for different capital structures, okay? So we have the market, the capital structure of the firm represented by the debt to equity ratio on the x-axis, and the cost of capital, the return on assets, is a constant percentage. We keep it flat because what changes is the level of the cost of equity. As we introduce more debt in the capital structure of the firm, the company becomes riskier. Because it becomes riskier and equity is a residual claim, so the shareholders are the ones that bear the risk of the operation and the financial risk of the company, then they start to request, to demand higher returns. So these higher returns are compensated by a higher proportion of debt, which is cheaper than equity. In such way, the cost of capital for the firm is a constant percentage. However, when we include the effect of taxes, we must remember that interest paid on debt are tax deductible, which means in net terms, I am paying a lower interest rate than the nominal rate. How much lower? Proportionally to the corporate tax rate. Yes?
Do we are going to introduce inflation at one point? Of course.
We do not introduce inflation in the calculation of WACC. You introduce inflation in your cash flows. Yeah?
I ask it because I guess there are the return debt is fixed rate. So we know that if inflation increases, that fixed rate is going to increase in real terms.
That's why either you're going to use this cost of capital to discount cash flows. So you should decide whether you work in nominal terms or real terms. And we know already that if we work in real terms, both cash flows and interest rates or discount rates, on nominal terms in cash flows and discount rates, there is no difference in the result. Remember that? So it is irrelevant. Inflation becomes irrelevant. Why? Because if I work in real terms or nominal terms, the present value is the same. That's why I should include inflation in my cash flows, not in my discount rates. Do you remember that? We proved it last semester. If I use nominal cash flows and discount those cash flows with nominal effective discount rates, the present value of that is exactly the same as if I use constant cash flows and real discount rates. The difference between the two exercises is just inflation. So, conclusion, inflation is irrelevant as long as I include the effect of inflation in my cash flows. And I repeat, cash flows, discount rates, interest rates, WACC should not include inflation. You include inflation in your cash flows, not in the interest rates. When you calculate discount, present value, fair value, when you apply discounted cash flow methods. We learned this before, and we learned it because we need it so that we can apply correctly these equations this semester. Okay? I know you economists are a little bit worry about inflation all the time. I know that's what you like. Yeah, but sometimes it's irrelevant. I have to say. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so when we include the effect of taxes, the cost of capital becomes known as the weighted average cost of capital. Some people call it WACC after tax, which in my humble opinion is incorrect. Because if it is WACC, it's afterward, after tax. Okay, we don't have WACCs before taxes. That does not exist. We have cost of capital, but you will, I think your book sometimes uses that term, WACC after taxes. So WACC is always for the purpose of our class. Whenever we use the term WACC, it's the cost of capital after taxes. Okay. Whenever we use the term WACC in our class, it means after taxes, right? So what happens when we include taxes in our capital structure? When we allow for the presence of taxes in our calculation, in our model, what happens is that if I start including a greater proportion of debt, which is usually cheaper than equity, for example, the cost will start to decrease because I am using cheaper bonds proportionally, right? So remember, the company will become riskier as the debt to equity ratio increases. And this greater risk will be absorbed by the shareholders, and it will be represented in the terms of the cost of equity. So the cost of equity will increase. You will not demand the same return for a company that has 10% debt in its capital structure as the return for a company that has 80% of debt in its capital structure. The risk is completely opposite, right? So you will demand higher return. So the savings you get for the inclusion of greater debt, which is cheaper than equity, at some point will disappear. And the increased cost of the shareholders will exceed the savings of the cheap debt. And then the cost of company, the WACC, will start increasing once more, okay? So we will reach a minimum WACC, which is called the optimum capital structure. That is the proportion of debt the company should use, because that would be the level of debt that would result in the lowest cost of capital for the firm. It is dynamic over the years. Why? Because the cost of debt and the cost of equity change. So that optimal capital structure is not static. It changes. We have to review it. It doesn't change every month. No. But probably every 2 years we should double check. Okay. All right. So far, so good?
Yes.
No. What happens if we assume that the debt of the company bears no market risk? If we assume the debt of the company bears no market risk, then the first term of the asset beta, which is the proportion of the debt in the company times the market risk of the debt, disappears, becomes zero, right? So I only end up with the proportion of equity financing times the market risk of the equity, okay? If we rearrange that equation, we get that we can estimate the business risk of a firm through the asset beta of the company using the observed equity beta of the firm. Why do we do that? Because we don't have information to estimate business risk. What we do have is prices for shares. Through the price of the share, I can create a time series of returns for the shares of the company. With that time series, I can calculate through a regression analysis beta. But that's the market risk of the shares. That's the market risk of the equity, which means what I can observe is equity betas. So I impair asset betas through equity betas. The easiest way of doing that is assuming that the debt has no risk, because the model, the equation becomes reduced. But if this assumption is incorrect, seems really out of place, then I cannot ignore debt beta, and I have to include it in my calculation. How would I get debt betas? Exactly the same. I am going to need secondary market prices for the debt, for the bonds. You understand what I'm saying? I calculate returns using secondary market prices for bonds, and I estimate betas for that time series. It's going to be the beta instead of equity beta, because instead of having prices for shares, I'm going to have prices for bonds. And I'm going to measure the market risk of the bonds, which is the beta. Okay? I repeat, if I can comfortably assume that the market risk of the debt is close to zero, then I reduce the model to the equations on the screen. If I cannot hold this assumption because it seems absolutely out of place for the company I am using as the target company, the company I am analyzing, then I use it. It's more work, yes, it's more work. Can I do it? Yes, I can. Okay. It's just more time. That's the only thing. Okay. We call asset beta unlevered beta. And we call equity betas levered beta. Why? Because when I measure the return of the stock of the company, I am, in a way, measuring the demanded return from shareholders. This return is the result of the financial risk of the firm. So the return that shareholders demand from the company that I observe through the share prices is a result of the risk imposed by the debt used in the company. So that leverage is then reflected in the stock prices and therefore reflected in the equity beta of the firm. And that is why we call them levered betas. So it's the measure of market risk of the firm that includes the effect of debt. And we already agreed that debt produces risk for the company, right? Increases risk for the company.
But the prices of shares isn't always affected by company's structure of the company.
Yes, of course, it has to be. Yes.
So I can assume that even if I have a beta of debt equal to zero, but the company is like 80% debt, 20% equity, it will be already punished, like that effect when I do the equation, and I don't need to worry about that, or I will.
It's not the proportion of debt. The beta measures the market risk of the debt. Is the value of the debt volatile due to changes in interest rates in the market? If the answer is yes, then probably we cannot ignore the beta. If the answer is no, it's not affected, then we can assume beta zero.
So I can see like beta asset as the risk, but not, it could be like a not risky company, but a very poorly managed company. I don't know if I explained myself.
Poorly managed
In
and
the
then
effect.
reflected in the financing, or poorly managed and reflected how?
It's because I'm imagining that maybe, as you were saying, it's riskier to have more debt than equity, a lot more debt than equity. And in that equation, even if I have like the fixed rate, so my beta of debt is zero, but I can have like a capital structure of 90% debt. So it's already like punished in the,
In the equity beta, yes.
yeah, we should say.
Yes. Why? Because, let me go back. How do I know, or how can I defend the idea that equity beta already includes the risk of the debt? Because of this, right? Remember, if the company did not have debt, then the WACC, because of capital, will be constant, right? But in the presence of taxes, the inclusion of debt in the company starts to increase. This is the return on equity required by the shareholders, right? So you see, the greater the debt I use in the capital structure, the higher the requested return from shareholders. Why are they increasing the return they require? Because of debt. So the effect of using debt in the company is reflected in the returns on the shares. How? By the demanded return from shareholders. And that time series, the share prices are used to estimate stock returns, and the time series of stock returns are used to obtain equity beta, right? Why? Because we regress the return on CEMEX. Right? That's how we would estimate the beta for a firm using share prices. The returns on the company, the returns on the stock of CEMEX are obtained through prices, right? The price of 2022 over the price of 2021. That would be the return for 2022, right? The returns are obtained through prices. These are share prices, right? And this return, which is a cost of equity, is this line. The return depends on how much debt the company uses. So the leverage is taken into account in the cost of equity. The cost of equity is the input I need for equity beta. Am I being clear? Yes? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Questions so far? That is WACC, weighted average cost of capital.
Last but not least, is this gonna come in the exam on Monday?
Yes. Yes. That's why we're gonna do this exercise. If we don't finish it, we'll finish it on Wednesday, on Friday. Okay. You're given this information. We have a company, MGB Limited. The capital structure includes long-term outstanding bonds. The description of the bond has a coupon rate of 7.5% per year. It is paid semi-annually, has a maturity of 5 years, a face value of $1,000 per bond, a current yield to maturity of 8%, and the company issued 10,000 bonds. Okay, I suggest you take notes of that because you're going to need it. What are we gonna do? We're going to estimate WACC for this year.
Semi-annually means every 6 months?
That's
or-
correct, yes. In the meantime, you copy the information you need. Let's see how we interpret the WACC. Let's say we manage to calculate WACC for our company, and we got 17% per annum. The weighted average cost of capital for our company is 17% per year. So what do we do with that? How do I use this number? It took me weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of work and analysis. What do I do with it?
Well, the WACC isn't like the, like the cost. Like the cost, well, the percentage that the investors, the percentage that the investors need to compensate that the investment of their capital in the business.
Yes, indeed. Since WACC is weighted average of the different costs of the company, this is the cost of debt. This is how much I pay in interest for debt. This is the return on equity. This is the return shareholders expect I give them. Okay. This is the proportion I use of equity in my capital structure. This is the proportion of debt I use in my capital structure. And by the way, of course, the proportion of debt and the proportion of equity should equal 1, should be 100, right? This is how much I pay of taxes, and this is the recognition. This factor is a recognition that the interest I pay on debt are tax deductible. So it decreases the net interest rate I pay at the end, okay? So this calculation gave me this 17%. So I'm gonna open another OXXO. I'm gonna open another franchise of Super Salads. I'm gonna open my own consulting business. I'm gonna open my own restaurant. I'm gonna build flats, apartments, and I'm gonna sell them. This is the WACC of my project. The restaurant, the building, the apartments, my consultancy, 70%. What do I do with that number?
Well, it means that at least that project should give me 17% or more, so that it will be like a good idea to make it.
That's why we call it opportunity cost. Because I need to generate an internal rate of return of at least 17% in whatever project I undertake with this debt and with this equity, so that I am able to repay debt and I am able to deliver the expected return to the shareholders. If the restaurant, if the new OXXO, if my own firm, if whatever project does not generate 17% or generates lower than that, I won't be able to pay whom? Let's say the internal rate of return is 15%. Which people who are not going to be paid? The shareholders, because banks are also investors. Why? Because they come at the end. They get whatever is left. They are a residual claim on the company's assets. If I don't get the WACC, if I don't reach the WACC, the shareholders are the first. Probably if my internal rate of return is 2%, not even the bank, right? So it depends what is the final rate of return I get. But the first ones to be heard are the shareholders. And because sometimes I am a shareholder in the project, then that's the reason I choose to assign a target rate way higher than 17%. Because what if we don't get the 17? I don't get paid. I want to get paid. Sometimes when you are not part of the project, you don't care that much. It's not my money, it's not my salary. If we don't get the 17%, there's no consequence for me. And that is why in many, many projects, the people you hire become part of the project, become shareholders of the project. That's why you pay with shares to your high executives so that they feel it. They feel what you feel, right? So it's a way of aligning the interests. They want the project to be successful because they are going to win, and so will you. Okay? Yeah? So that's why it's so important, because this is something that is called a hurdle rate. You know what a hurdle is? Hurdle races, in the Olympics, that you have to jump, the hurdles. It's a reference, an obstacle, right? It's a hurdle rate. It's the minimum rate you need to produce. That's why it's so important. Yes.
You can say that the work in average for the company, every dollar they use, it costs them 70 cents.
That's correct.
And so that the IRR have to be higher or the same as
At least,
it.
at least what?
Yes, because you can pay that.
Exactly. Excellent. That's an interpretation. For every dollar of financing, for every dollar of funds used in the company, it is costing 17 cents. If it were 30%, the what? Which is very high. Then for every dollar I am using, no matter if it is debt or equity, for every dollar I am using, it is costing me 30 cents. Right?
Teacher,
Yes?
so also what can be a measure of risk, because the company who has higher works had to produce.
Yeah, although the risk is really this, right? So yes, we can see WACC as a measure of risk. Why? Because it is composed by two measures of risk. Right? All right, so far so good? Okay, so that's the debt financing. Then, this company also has 100,000 outstanding shares of common stock. The price per share is $50. They have a book value of $25. The expected return of this stock that pays no dividends is 15% per year. What we want to know is the weighted average cost of capital in nominal terms for this company if the tax rate were 25%. 25% of taxes. For the sake of the midterm exam, this is all we need to know about WACC, because we will go into more detail later, okay? So you need to be able to calculate the price of a bond, so the value of the debt, the value of equity, translated into WACC, interpret it. That's it. Okay?
Teacher,
Yes?
when you calculate what you have only take an account outstanding share price. You cannot take an account treasury stock.
No.
Because it's a market value.
Exactly. We need to use market values for debt, for equity, and the firm. Okay? Not book values. I repeat, in order to calculate WACC, we need to use the value of debt, value of equity, and therefore the value of the firm in terms of market value. Not book values, not face values, market values. Okay? Remember that the value of debt plus the value of equity equals the value of the firm for the equation of WACC. The proportions of the funding should equal 1. The sum of the market values of debt and equity should equal the market value. Okay? So we have this information. What do we have to do to estimate WACC for the firm?
Get the percentage of debt and equity.
To obtain the market value of debt and the market value of equity. Shall we start with debt?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the information we have for debt. What do we do? The price. What do you propose? The price of all the bonds? The price of one bond? The price of one. We estimate the price of one bond. Then, after that, what do we do? Okay. First, we estimate the price of one bond. We multiply by the number of bonds. And in such a way, we will obtain the market value of debt. Okay? Let's do that. How do we estimate the market value, the price of this bond?
Because we made the payment.
Okay. Tell me, how do we calculate the price of a bond? The price of a bond equals
The summatory of
sum.
the coupon rate between the yield to maturity of one to the times
The coupon rate, sorry, say it again?
between the yield to maturity times how much
One. Coupon rate over yield to maturity?
no, yield to maturity plus one. Or one plus yield to maturity.
So the present value of the coupon. The coupon rate is 7.5%. So what do I do with that? Sorry, I sum what?
And you discount it by the yield to maturity.
But do I discount the coupon rate?
No.
The coupon pay.
The coupon payment, right? Which is the coupon rate times
The
the face value of the bond. Right. So the coupon rate times the face value, and because this is a sum, I assume is 1 plus PT and YTM to the potence n. How many coupons are we going to add? 10? Plus the present value, plus the face value. Discounted how many periods? Did you all agree? The price of the bond is the sum of the present value of 10 coupons plus the face value, plus the present value of the face value. Did you agree? Do we all agree? Okay. So coupon rate equals?
7.5%.
I'm going to substitute the values in the equation.
Then it's not 7.5%.
It's-
Then it's it's half, so it's
Okay.
3.75%.
And the face value is 1,900. The yield to maturity for the equation is
It's 8 per year, so it's 8.
Divided by.
It's 4%.
Do we agree?
Yeah.
Why this one? Can anyone tell us why are we dividing the age to maturity by 2? Why?
Because the
It's
coupon is
based
paid semi-annually.
Mhm. Because the coupons are semi-annual, so every 6 months. So we need to discount semi-annual cash flows using semi-annual discount rates, right? So in fact, this 10 refers to semesters, not years, right? Why? Because the maturity is 5 years, so 10 semesters. Right? Do we agree?
Yes.
So the price of the bond is how much? Bond price. Before you give me the number, before you give me the number, hold your horses. So the face value is 1,000. The yield to maturity is 8, and the coupon is 7.5. Just by looking at those numbers, should the price of this bond be greater, equal, or lower than 1,000? Not always. No. It could be greater, lower, or equal. It could be any. Not in this case, it's only one answer, but generally speaking, the price of a bond could be equal to the face value, greater to the face than the face value, or lower. Okay. So in this case,
Because it is divided by 1 plus 8%.
for the price to be equal to the face value, how should the coupon rate and the yield to maturity should be equal? For the face value to equal the price of a bond, the coupon rate and the yield to maturity should be equal. If the bond pays a coupon rate greater than the yield to maturity, the price will be greater than the face value. If the coupon is lower than the yield to maturity, we should expect a price. No, we should not expect. The price will be, because this is mathematical, okay, lower than the face value. So the answer should be lower than $1,000. Then you know at least if you get 1,200, you know it's wrong, and you correct it. Look for the mistake. Okay? So how much is it? What is the price of the bond? 100, 800 something?
984.7417.
Like that? Does everyone agree? Did you get the same result? So it's 3.75% times 1,000, that is the coupon, divided by 1 plus 0.04, which is 4%, 10 times. Do you remember the equation for this? This is an annuity, right? The present value of an annuity equals the annuity times 1 plus the interest rate. Right? Or once more, yes. That's why corporate finance is simply one subject. It's just that we don't have time in one semester to finish it. We have to split it into 2. It's just one subject, right? We use it. Everything that we see in the last semester, we will use it this semester. Imagine every semester you are here at the school. Imagine this is the ground. And we are building the cementation of this wonderful, tall, successful, beautiful building. It's you. Yes? When you finish the school, we will see you, but at school, you don't get shown, okay? We are just building, okay? Pardon me? Okay, did you get the price, $984?
Give me a second.
Yes, do we agree? Did you get the same value? Everyone? No?
I'm waiting.
And the present value of the face value, provided a future value equals future value. I'm just waiting for your confirmation, yeah?
All right, that will be good.
You have different results? $979.
99.67.
I'm using all the voices, that's why we get. So $979 with 72 cents. Yeah, that's, so it's using all the decimal places. So probably it's just rounding. The difference is not that much. Okay, but I'm gonna use 979.7. Okay, that's the value of one bond. So step number 2, multiply, in order to get market value of debt, multiply that price times the number of bonds. 979 on 10,000, isn't it? Is that right?
Yes.
So that's what, 9 million? Let me get more. Is that right? Dollars, right? $9.8 million, approximately. All right?
Yes.
Now, what do we do with the equity?
Sure.
Yes?
The different result I got with the price was because the face value I discounted with the annual rate and I
No. Why is that incorrect?
Yeah.
If you use
no
4% per semester in the first term and then 8% for this one, you are using different rates. Why? Because this annualized effectively is not 8, it's more than 8. If you use the rates correctly, you get the same result. But you are using the rates incorrectly because you are mixing.
but I mean in the first term the rate is the coupon rate because
Yes.
it's paid semi-annually,
Yeah.
but the other term is just a payment.
Yeah, but you're not getting my point. This 4% means that every semester you are discounting 4%. Every semester. So 1.04 squared is not 8%. It's more than 8. So you have to discount at the correct yield to maturity annual. If you use it, you will get the same result. Did you understand?
Yes, I double check it. I used the 4% in the first term and then the 8 in the second.
And that is incorrect.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to explain. Yes? Okay? All right? What do we do with the equity? Oh, we don't have time because it's almost +3. All right. On Friday, we'll have class here in the classroom. We'll finish this exercise and we'll do some other exercises about WAC. All right? Clear?
Yes.
Thank you very much. No,